Why did ancient humans first travel? Imagine you are standing at the edge of everything you have ever known. Behind you, the valley where you were born, the fire your family keeps alive, the faces of the only people you have ever met. Ahead of you, nothing. Just open land stretching into a horizon no one from your group has ever crossed. Why would anyone take that first step? Today we are going to answer that question, and the answer is stranger, more dangerous, and more human than you might expect. This is not just a story about migration. It is a story about what it means to be the kind of creature that looks at an unknown horizon and feels something other than fear. It is a story about the first travelers, people with no maps, no roads, and no guarantee of return, and why they went anyway. Because here is the truth. Almost everything about modern human civilization, every city, every language, every cuisine, every tradition, traces back to a series of decisions made by small groups of people who chose to keep walking when they could have stayed. The world they left behind. For the first 200,000 years of Homo sapiens' existence, our species barely moved. We were concentrated in sub-Saharan Africa, living in small bands of 20 to 50 people. Life was not easy, but it was knowable. You understood the rivers, the predators, the seasons, the plants. You knew which berries were safe, which paths the big cats patrolled, where to find water in the dry months. Leaving that behind was not a decision someone would make lightly. So what changed? Climate. Around 70,000 to 100,000 years ago, the planet went through cycles of dramatic cooling and warming. Forests shrank. Savannas expanded. The animals humans hunted moved. And when the food moves, you move with it, or you starve. This is the first reason ancient humans traveled. Survival. Not curiosity. Not adventure. Pure necessity. But consider what survival actually demanded of these early travelers. They were moving into landscapes they had never seen, hunting animals whose behavior they did not know, sleeping under skies whose stars made unfamiliar patterns. Every single day was an experiment. Every meal was uncertain. The people who made it through were not just lucky, they were adaptable in ways that would permanently shape the human genome. Scientists who study ancient DNA have found traces of this pressure everywhere. Populations that survived early migrations show genetic signatures of intense selection, traits for immune resilience, metabolic flexibility, even psychological tolerance for novelty and uncertainty. The journey did not just move humans. It changed them. And the cost was real. Genetic evidence suggests that at one point during this period, possibly around the Toba supervolcanic eruption 74,000 years ago, the global human population may have dropped to just a few thousand individuals. We came terrifyingly close to disappearing entirely. That we did not is, in some sense, a testament to the same stubborn forward motion that defines us. But survival alone does not explain everything. Because when we look at the fossil and genetic record, we do not just see people following food in straight lines. We see detours, dead ends, groups splitting apart for no obvious ecological reason. Something else was also at work. The social engine. Here is something researchers discovered that completely changed how we think about early migration. In small bands, social conflict was probably the #1 driver of movement. Think about it. If you live in a group of 30 people and you have a serious falling out with someone, a dispute over food, a romantic conflict, a power struggle, you cannot just block them on your phone. You have to live with them every single day. The easiest solution? Anthropologists who study modern hunter-gatherer societies, groups whose lifestyle most closely mirrors our ancestors, have found that voluntary fission is extremely common. Groups split not because resources are running out, but because the social tension becomes unbearable. The family decides they need space. A younger hunter feels overshadowed by the group's elder. A couple wants to start their own household away from collective scrutiny. The reasons are entirely human and entirely familiar. And when a splinter group walks away, they walk into new territory. They adapt. They survive. Over thousands of years, Those small social exits add up to continental migration. There is something profound in this. The same emotional landscape that drives people to move cities today, to leave complicated family situations and start over somewhere new, was also carving the map of our ancient dispersal. We were not just following animals across continents. We were also running from difficult dinners. But social conflict was not only a push factor, it was also a pull. Alliances between groups created corridors of movement. When your sister married someone from a band 3 valleys over, you now had a reason to travel there. You had people to stay with. You had food and shelter guaranteed. Trade networks formed slowly along these kinship lines, and those networks became routes, and those routes became roads of a kind, invisible highways traced not in stone but in obligation and relationship. The social world of early humans was not static. It was a web of obligations, rivalries, marriages, and feuds, and every thread in that web had the potential to pull someone in a new direction. But there is a third force we have not talked about yet, and it is the one that separates us from every other species that ever walked this planet. The uniquely human drive. No other animal explores for the sake of knowing. A wolf follows prey. A bird follows warmth. But humans, even in environments where food was abundant and danger was high, have consistently shown behavior that looks a lot like exploration for its own sake. We find evidence of this in the archaeological record. Tools carried hundreds of kilometers from their origin point, shells used as ornaments sourced from coastlines the owners never lived near, pigments traded across vast distances between groups who had never met face to face. This is not survival. This is something closer to curiosity institutionalized. Cognitive scientists call it neophilia, the love of novelty. Humans have it in abundance compared to other primates. We are wired to seek out new stimuli, new environments, new information. In the ancestral world, that trait had real survival value. A group that explored their territory thoroughly knew where the water sources were during drought, where the best hunting was in winter, where to run if predators closed in. But over time, that drive did not just help groups survive within their territory. It pushed them beyond it. When we crossed into the Arabian Peninsula, when we reached the shores of what is now Australia, a journey that required open water crossing with no guarantee of land on the other side, when we stepped into the frozen corridors of Siberia and eventually walked into the Americas, we were not being pushed by famine or drought in every case. Sometimes we were simply following the oldest human impulse there is, to see what is on the other side. This impulse was not random or irrational. The groups that explored were the groups that accumulated knowledge. Knowledge about territory, about resources, about alternative routes when the primary path closed. Exploration was information gathering at a civilizational scale. The individuals who wandered widened the perimeter of human understanding. And the knowledge they brought back, or the paths they opened, gave their descendants options that non-explorers never had. There is also something to be said about storytelling. Humans are the only animals that travel in their minds before they travel in body. When a scout returned to camp with a description of a valley 2 weeks walk to the north, a valley with wide rivers and slow game, that story became a kind of pre-map. It reduced the uncertainty of the unknown just enough to make the journey conceivable. Language, in this sense, may have been as important a migration technology as any stone tool. Words made the horizon thinkable. And a thinkable horizon is one you can walk toward. Outro. So, why did ancient humans first travel? Because their world was changing and standing still meant death. Because their social lives were complicated, and sometimes the most rational thing you could do was walk away. And because buried deep in our biology is a restlessness that no amount of comfort seems to fully quiet. Every road trip you have taken, every flight to a country you had never visited, every time you moved to a new city because something about the old one did not fit anymore, that is the same force. Dressed different. Expressed through planes and passports instead of bare feet and flint. But the same ancient pull. And consider this. The person sitting next to you on your last flight, the stranger you passed on the street this morning, the people in every country you have ever visited, every single one of them is descended from someone who made that choice. Someone who looked at the horizon and decided the known world was not enough. We are a species that moves. We have always been. And the fact that you are watching this, wherever in the world you are, is direct evidence of that. Every human being alive today is descended from someone who looked at an unknown horizon and decided to keep walking. The explorers did not just survive. They became everyone. That is the part that stays with me. When we talk about ancient migration, we tend to frame it as a chapter in a history textbook, distant, finished, belonging to someone else. But it is not finished. It is you. The curiosity that made you click on this video, the restlessness that makes you wonder about the world before yours, that is not a metaphor. That is a direct inheritance from the first travelers. If you found this interesting, the story gets even wilder when we look at the specific routes our ancestors took, the genetic dead ends, the ghost populations that lived and vanished without a trace, the groups that reached the edge of a continent and kept going anyway across open water into the unknown. That is next week. See you then.